You are listening to Creating Active Lives with me, Sarah Blytho, and my regular weekly guests, and we are all here to share the research, the science, and the strategies, as well as some of the fun, to help you to create a more active life. Hello and welcome to this episode of Creating Active Lives with me, Sarah Blytho, and my guest, Hannah Ashton. Hannah has two driving passions in her life, helping others, but also nurturing creativity. And creativity is something I'm passionate about as well. But this has kind of led to her working as an occupational therapist for 18 years within the NHS. And she really gained a deep understanding of some of the challenges faced by individuals that she worked with. And a few years ago, she started a new chapter of her life following her creative passions and became a woodworker. So she now has a business, HKA Create, which looks at wooden functional art. So creativity, not just thinking outside the box, but actually creating the box itself as well, which is lovely. So Hannah, tell us a little bit more about yourself and what you do.
Hello, thank you so much for inviting me onto the podcast today. I'm really excited to be here. So I've moved on a little bit from the woodworking. So I'm now a creative thinking coach. And so I'm helping small business owners and entrepreneurs to break through the barriers that are stopping them moving forward in their business and reaching their goals. So I do that with creative problem solving to transform obstacles into opportunities and help to uncover new possibilities to challenge that status quo and discover the potential that we have inside us for creativity.
And it's, for me, creativity, and it's a while ago I had one of these free things that you put out there, and it was ways to reboot, refresh, recharge, and actually do something creative was one of them. Whether it's actually creating something brand new or doing something like a jigsaw or sketching or something like that. And it's such an important activity, because it is an activity. We might not be getting hot and sweaty and running all over the place, but it is an activity that's so important for our minds, isn't it? Why is it so important for our minds that we actually don't just sit down and switch off, but we do something creative?
So creativity, it's an interesting word, because when I speak to people and ask them what they deem to be creativity, they will often come up with things such as drawing or painting or maybe playing an instrument. But then if you dig a little bit deeper, you do start thinking about exercise, but then you start thinking about problem solving and generating ideas and really getting your mind thinking. And that's often sort of the second thought that comes. I didn't really know, even though I deemed myself a creative person, I didn't really look at the word creativity until the beginning of this year, when I wanted to sort of pivot my business and to understand what creativity really meant. And it was more to do with the way that you express yourself in the environment and how people perceive you. And then all those ideas that are created, and then it moves on to your imagination and your curiosity, which I feel as adults we lose. I think certainly as children, that if you're around a child for long enough, they will ask you a million questions. And what is fascinating with that is that they are trying to understand the world around them and how they fit into it. And so they're constantly asking the why, the what's, the when's, the how's. And we stop doing that as adults. I think we sort of go along a path and we want to feel safe and protected and feel like we can't step over that comfort zone and take risks. So as a result, we just lose all that ability and those networks and connections that we make in our brain as a child. And we just keep doing the same thing again and again and again. Whereas if you just step out and do something a little bit different, your mind opens up and you start thinking of things in a very different way. And that's what creativity allows you to do. And it's really, as you said, this whole thing of looking at the box. And so thinking outside the box, thinking inside the box, but creating with the
Yeah.
box will actually expand your mind and start seeing things from all these new perspectives. And it's just amazing because you think about creativity, think about a world without creativity,
Yeah, it
and
would
you think,
be.
how dull will that be? That if you looked around your wherever you're sitting now, you wouldn't have any of the things. You and I wouldn't have connected. We wouldn't have been able to talk like we are now.
No.
And all the things that I can see, my house, the things I'm wearing, none of that would have existed without creativity.
It's true, isn't it? But it's really interesting when you say about children, because anyone out there who is a parent will know why, and it drives you mad. But actually, it is inquiring. It's asking for
Yeah.
answers. And the other thing that I think children do that we stop doing is daydream.
Mm.
And when we daydream, we are literally imagining, oh, quite often completely unrealistic scenarios. But actually, that's an important part of creating a bigger kind of picture, isn't it? And it's something that I think we just stop doing. Even, but like you say, the environment, even sitting in a different chair or turning your
Mm.
desk the other way or walking a different way to work or to school or wherever, you suddenly see things differently, and it can spark things. And I think you're right. We get so fixed in our routines that
Yeah.
we don't notice in the way that we used to.
Yeah.
So
And I think I'm certainly finding at the moment that if you just say, if a lot of people that I work with are stuck where they are, they can't seem to sort of overcome these blocks. And one thing I tell them is to stop. Just stop what you're doing and just take a step back. And it's a bit like, I don't know if there are films where you have that central character in the middle of the shot, and they're like in this bubble, and they're not either not moving or moving slowly, and everything else is going crazily
yeah,
around them. And it's just, if you go, let's just stop here, and I'm going to just be present in that moment and really focus on what I'm doing and block out all that noise. And as you said, with daydreaming, it's one of the exercises that I encourage people to do, of just sitting still, putting your phone away, and just listening to the sounds around you. And by blocking out all that buzzing that's happening in your brain and just focusing on sounds, it's a really simple exercise, but it just stops you, and you can focus on the noise. And then you may do that for a couple of minutes, and it might be at the end you stop, and because you've basically got rid of everything else in your mind, you can then suddenly, this thought will come into your head, and it's often a thought that you've been really struggling with, or something, maybe something new, and you can write that down. And it is that opportunity to just let your mind wander, which I think we're all in busy lives, and just to say to someone, stop, you've got permission to stop, and they're like, oh, thank you so
yeah.
much. And you feel like you can't, you've got to keep going, keep going, keep going. And it's like, no, stop. That's what you need to do.
And it's, funnily enough, two previous episodes I've talked about with a guest the power of nature and being outside in nature, but also the importance of stillness, but not just sitting down doing nothing. It's about being in, physical alignment, the correct alignment, and just focusing in on your breathing and just being still. And we tend to think of activity as, like I say, exercise, fitness, going to the gym, going for a walk, but sometimes an important part of activity is consciously stopping, not just stomping in front of the TV, but actually consciously stopping and just being in the moment. And like you say, I love a good daydream. I don't know about you, but I love a good daydream. And
Yeah.
sometimes I think that does spark our possibility thinking, to quote someone else I work
Yes.
with. It's do you know what? Sometimes that those few moments you go, oh, actually, what if I did this instead? And I think this is where doing something creative can help as well, because it gives your subconscious mind, your creative mind, time to actually start thinking about what they're going to do, because your conscious mind switched off and isn't focusing on problems.
Yes, I find that if I've been really busy and overwhelmed, I will go down to my workshop and just 10 minutes of just painting something, and you can feel as if that weight is being taken off you, and like it sort of layers are sort of being peeled away. And it doesn't have to take long. You don't have to do these elaborate exercises. Very simple exercise of literally painting a piece of wood, and you can just feel that and go, oh, and then that undoes all that sort of tightness that you've been
Yeah.
feeling with the overwhelm.
It's funny, isn't it? I did a few months back, I did a resin workshop, and it was just 2 hours of just completely switching off. And I'd always wanted one of those resin seascapes, you see, and I was thinking, oh gosh, they must be really difficult. And actually, but it was just 2 hours of bliss, of chatting to people, of just concentrating on creating something really special. And I'm so proud of it, you know. And it's just something that time switched off was so important, because it just meant I could stop being busy for a while and just do and things like that. Yeah. So, when you were an occupational therapist, what is an occupational therapist? I know a lot of people may not fully understand what an occupational therapist does. So,
no, it's unfortunately, it's a profession that many people, as you say, don't know about, or if they even know about it, they don't fully understand it. And unfortunately, I think, well, the term occupational therapist is misleading in the first instance, that so many people associate that with employment.
yeah.
I would have so many patients go, but I'm not working. And it's like, no, it's because you are focusing on the activities that occupy your time.
Yeah.
And that wasn't really understood. But it's such a valuable profession. And what a lot of people also don't know is that we are dual trained, so both physical and mental health.
Right.
So we would look at individuals, we would provide like a holistic approach, and consider the patient's overall well-being rather than specifically looking at one aspect. So if they've come in with a physical injury, we wouldn't just purely look at that. We would look at how that impacted on them as a whole. And ultimately, their goal was our goal was to help individuals regain or enhance their independence in daily activities.
Right.
So that was the key part, that activities were the foundation that we then built everything upon.
So what sort of activities did people struggle with when they started to work with you?
So obviously when we first would see them, we would ask them numerous questions, asking about their daily activities, so from washing and dressing, and then domestic activities around the home, and then employment, and then hobbies. And it would then provide us a bit like a jigsaw. So we'd have all these pieces of information and we'd put them all together, and then you would find these missing pieces. And so sometimes, as I said, it might be they've had a broken arm, but it would mean that they then couldn't go to work. And so that then had these knock-on implications, that they then would lose their sort of identity in their role, and they wouldn't be having a purpose, a day-to-day purpose, getting them to their job. They would lose interaction with their colleagues. So if patients were wanting to go to work, and this, when I was working in occupational therapy, this was before 2020. And so working from home wasn't the norm. And so, as I said, it's sort of, they would lose the day-to-day purpose, and getting up for work. And for example, so a patient who had a stroke, they their goal might be to regain the ability to cook for their family.
Right.
And so we would look beyond just restoring that physical skill, but we would look at their cognitive abilities, so problem solving and memory, and as well as the emotional factors of motivation and confidence. So we would use cooking and activities as a therapeutic tool. So activities served as an invaluable means for both understanding that individual, but also providing therapy for them.
So it's everyday activity therapy, isn't it? It
Yeah.
is to do with normal daily. Well, I say normal, but everyday life. It's about being able to do the things in everyday life that keep us independent as much as
Yes.
anything, including going. But going to work is kind of a higher stage, if you like, than just being able to get up, get dressed, feed yourself, and things like that.
Yeah.
So what sort of?
So it's like
How did I was going to say, how did creativity fit into the work that you did?
So when the last few years of my work, I was working in trauma and orthopedics and rehabilitation, and we would have patients come in and with various obviously traumas to the upper limb or lower limb, and we would either create, which I love so much, create splints and braces to immobilize or support sort of whichever part of the body that was affected. And it's a bit like Blue Peter in the sense that it was this plastic material that you heated up and you would then mold it around them. And I just loved that, like literally hands-on creativity.
Yeah.
And you would sort of come up with this thing that would do what you wanted it to do. But then the other side was the rehabilitation, and we had this machine, and you could put various components on it, which then replicated specific daily activities. And this is where I excelled. I just loved it because it was an amazing machine, but the user had to be really creative and imaginative.
Right.
Because you had this component, and some of them, yes, they looked like a steering wheel. So obviously you would then work on, if someone was struggling to drive, you would replicate and repeat that movement back and forth. But you could also use it for other things. And so if people were struggling to get dressed, you could replicate movement. So if they had limited movement of the shoulder and they couldn't reach behind their back, I would manipulate the head of this machine, add the right attachment, and then simulate that movement. And I remember people would go, "That's so clever, Hannah." And I was like going, "Well, isn't this just common sense? And you just do this, this, and this." And it's only recently I thought, no, it's because I've got creativity inside me. I have the ability to work out all these ideas. I've got these things in front of me, but I make these connections together to then create this creative solution. And I just loved that work. And even now talking about it, I still feel the buzz, even though I'm not doing it anymore. And it was just coming up with those solutions for that individual person because they've told me something. They've got, this is who they are. This is the problem they've got. I've then worked out exactly what is meaningful to them. And so, and that's the thing with activities. It's what is meaningful and what is purposeful to them as an individual.
Yes.
Because we're all very different. And so you could ask the same questions to people, but you would then dig a little bit deeper and truly understand, okay, what is really important to you at this moment in time? And it might be that they wanted to get dressed without anybody helping them. And so that's what we would be working towards. And so initially it might be that you would have to say, well, someone's going to have to come in and help you so you can still get dressed at this initial stage. But then we're going to work on different aspects of that movement and within that activity, and build that up through the weeks. And then by the end, we will achieve that you're independent dressing yourself without assistance.
And it's so important, isn't it? I mean, when you're in fitness or any of the health professions, we talk about activities of daily living, and there are various levels of them. And until you've lost an activity of daily living, until you can't do it for whatever reason, you don't realise how important some of the smaller steps are in an active lifestyle. In that, if you can't get yourself dressed, I work with people who all they want to do is be able to get in and out of the bath on their own because they don't want someone seeing them naked. But you can't just sort of say, all right, let's work on there's a lot more. You've got to work on shoulder rotation, shoulder range of movement, tricep strength, chest strength, back strength. There's so much to it, but you've got to start somewhere, haven't you? And it's these basic activities that I think sometimes people, even with creativity, they'll try and do something huge without necessarily starting at a smaller point and building a foundation and then building on from there. It's like me with my resin workshop. You know, I could have probably bought all the equipment and sat down and watched a YouTube video and done it, but it wouldn't have been as good as working with somebody who's trained for years in how to do this and really knows. So this is where it's so important, isn't it, to work with somebody who can say, right, that's what you want to do. We need to start here.
Yeah, it is. And with occupational therapy, we did this whole thing called activity analysis. And that is the whole process of breaking down an activity into all its component parts and then evaluating each of those parts and then attaining a value to it. And I think that's the thing, that every single thing that we do. So if I asked you to describe how would you make a cup of tea, what would you say?
Can we make it coffee? Not a tea drink.
Okay.
But I know what you mean. It's right. I'd have to fill a kettle with some water, plug it in, switch it on, get a teacup, get some milk, get the tea bag, get the sugar. Yeah, there's lots of different stages, aren't there? Make sure the plug's switched on. How much water to add? Is it the right amount? Is it too much? Have I got a mug? Is it a big mug, a small mug? There's lots of different things, aren't there, to think about.
Yeah, I love. What was really fascinating then is that you started in very simple steps, but then you just went down into that deeper level of understanding it a bit more. Then in occupational therapy, we would then look about actually the movements. So when you walk across to the cupboard, what joints, ligaments, muscles you're using, what then actual movements of all those joints is happening. Then we're looking at the cognitive ability and then the sensory. And so you literally, it's a bit like a computer. You are just ticking all these things off. And so you imagine a mind of an OT when they're observing someone and assessing someone, they're looking at all these things are going through, and it isn't just switching on the kettle and putting a tea bag in and a cup. It's all those other things, and that's when you sort of really dig deep into that minutiae of the activities and really understanding what the importance, but then also at what stage people are struggling with, because it's not just the physical capabilities, there are the cognitive and the emotional and the environmental. All those other things impact on that activity that they're trying to perform.
That's so true, isn't it? Because somebody might not be making a cup of tea, not because they don't know how to make a cup of tea, but because where the kettle is or the tea bags are is not accessible for them at this stage because of an issue. So it's breaking it right down. So creative activities then, obviously you've used a lot of creativity within your role as an OT, and now you're focusing much more on being a creative thinking coach. So how does creativity come into the work that you do as a coach?
So it's really interesting. I feel like my initial challenge with people is breaking down the fact. I ask people, are they creative? And they say no. And you will ask a successful business person who has created this business that's thriving, and they won't deem themselves creative. And so that's my initial stage, that people perceive, as I said earlier, that it's to do with drawing and things like that, but it's all those other aspects that are involved. And so with businesses, that you have to start with an idea, and that's where creativity is so key. And you have that initial idea, but you then need more and more ideas as you go along in business. And so you need to it's like a car filling up with fuel, and the fuel is creativity. You need to keep feeding it for that car, that business, to move forward. And creative exercises can be so easy to do. They don't have to be expensive or complicated. Like you said, about just going out for a walk and opening your eyes to the inspiration around you. So looking at the buildings, looking at the trees, looking at the shapes of the clouds that are around you, or grabbing a piece of paper, doing a bit of doodling or free writing to let those ideas flow freely. Even brainstorming is it's an exercise that many people do, but you can go out for a walk and you can brainstorm on a walk and dictate your ideas and thoughts into your phone. And we've mentioned about changing your environment. We've got a camper van, and I will go and sit in the camper van when my daughters are at sort of activities. And that feeling, as we've mentioned, about that relaxed state, I come up with so many ideas when I've changed my environment, when I'm in that van. And it's really important in business to sort of foster those environments and those creative spaces, to encourage people to bring creativity into the business.
Yes.
Because it's just for them to start thinking differently. Because I think if we are so sort of like, you're told to do this, and this, then you just keep doing it. Whereas if you say, actually, let's try and look at it a different way. How can this be done differently? And if you'll then go, oh, are we allowed to do that? I think that whole shift in the sort of, and looking at the status quo of things, because we're often not allowed to say, oh, I don't think that's quite right, or could it be done differently? And that's where I think creativity is so important in businesses, that let's see what we've already got, but how can it be done differently?
It's a bit like a muscle, use it or lose it, really, and it gets stronger the more you use it. Do you know, it's really interesting because I go to the States a lot. I go to a particular area that's the foothills of the Rockies, and I do quite a lot of hill climbing, not mountains yet, but hill climbing. And after I've done that, I tend to sit and sketch. I'm not a great sketcher or anything, but I just find it really, I've hiked it, now I'm going to sketch it and things like that. But I always find when I'm on the plane, when I'm there, I just get these bursts of creativity, these ideas and everything. And I come back with loads and loads of notes. But I always say to people, when you do that, when you come home, move something around. Either get different coloured cushions or move a couple of bits of furniture around, swap some furniture, move some books on a bookshelf. Come back to a different environment, because that kind of keeps your creativity going. And I'm just thinking that that's kind of what you're saying, is by changing our environment even slightly, it keeps that creativity going. And it's, as I say, it's something I've always done. It's something I always tell people to do. But now I'm understanding why. It's flexing my creativity muscle a bit more. And I know it's joints that flex, not muscles, but it's working my creativity muscle and keeping that going, because I'm not coming home into the same old environment and slipping back into the same old ways. I'm shifting things around so that when I walk into the room, it's different. I'm thinking differently. I hope that makes sense, because it does to me.
No, it does make sense. No, it totally does. That, and I think this is the thing, that we need to take control of it. Because I feel that we're told what to do and we conform to these roles. And so as a result, like, you've got to do things this way. You think, well, why? Why do I have to do it that way? Because actually, but if I did it this way, I feel better doing it this way. And I want to stand out. And certainly with bringing creativity into business, it will encourage you to stand out from the crowd because you will be different. And people will go, ooh, that's interesting. They're doing something different over there. I'm going to see what that is. And then that's what you want in business. You want to attract these people to you. And so by doing different things, then it's very easy to do. It takes a while. And certainly if you feel you're not creative, it will be something like, oh, I feel a bit uncomfortable, but that's really good. Actually, stepping out of your comfort zone is actually brilliant because it generates these new connections within your brain, and then you will sort of incorporate old experiences and knowledge with that, and then you'll sit down and do a project, and you'll suddenly come up with an idea. You think, where's that come from? And it's because you stepped out of your comfort zone 2 weeks before doing something. You've got this new pathway within your brain, and it's really important to sort of start with small little steps, and so bringing it as a habit into your day-to-day life. So it might be that you go for a walk for 5 minutes, or you just step out of your house and you come back in. Just really break it down and achieve it, because that's the thing. It's going back to my OT days of let's achieve, or sort of let's create achievable goals. And so initially you think, oh, it's too overwhelming. It's like, okay, we'll just do it for 5 minutes, do it for 1 minute, and do an activity that it's easy for you and that you enjoy. So don't go and do the really hard stuff. First of all, do something that you feel comfortable doing, and then you can increase it with the time or the different time of the day, working out what's the right time for you. And then there are lots of different exercises you can do, and it will be dependent on what you're about to do. So there will be ones where if you think, this is going to be really hard, I've got to really get my brain thinking about maybe writing an email or something. So you would do an exercise that really got your mind prepared to start working and making connections. Or it might be an activity, as we've mentioned, about feeling so overwhelmed, you just need something just to sit and be calm. And that might be going and reading a book, or just sitting outside and watching the clouds go by. Something super simple that we can all achieve. And it's just making sure you create that dedicated time during your day, and where you go, right, I'm going to stop. It might be that you have to put an appointment for yourself in your diary. At 1 p.m. today, I'm going to stop and do this.
Creative time. I'm all for putting things like this in the calendar, because I think then you tend to do it. So I'm just thinking it's okay to colour outside the lines then. In actual fact, this is funny with kids. They colour outside the lines all over the place when they start, and we tell them it's brilliant, and then we start saying, maybe try and get it in. Why do we have to colour inside the lines? I started my sketching because I used to do a lot, and then I've started again recently, and I'd actually draw around the leaf, and then gradually I'd just draw the leaf, but it was about confidence. Okay, I can draw around it, and then I'll fill in the inside, and then it was like, no, I don't need the leaf. I can just draw it. And then I can make it up, and then I'll make up a leaf, and Wonderful. For me, it was just building my confidence back up in little steps. And now I'll sketch away. I'm probably never going to show them to anybody, but I just love it. And that's when I finish, I'll get ideas pinging left, right, and centre. Oh, I should do this. And I
think you've sort of mentioned about that creative confidence, that often it's because of what's happened in school. We've been told we're not creative, and you're creative if you get an A, and you're not creative if you got a D. And so that's been instilled in you throughout your academic life. And so you come out going, well, I'm not creative. But you think, well, had you had the right opportunity or the right teacher, or they worded things in a different way, or you're exposed to different mediums, and you were given that opportunity and time to explore, then you will then discover that you are creative. You just never was given that opportunity.
And creativity is in the eye of the beholder as well, isn't it?
Yes. And like you were saying about totally. Because sometimes the end result isn't important.
No.
It's the process that you, like you were mentioning, of being with somebody else, that interaction with somebody else, and the movement of your hand and the way that you're thinking and your imagination and all those processes and skills that you do in order to achieve that end result. But that's what's important. The end result, yes, it's wonderful. It doesn't need to be graded. You don't need to compare yourself with anybody else, because you feel amazing after doing that activity. And that is what you need to really grasp onto. Not, oh, that picture's lovely. It doesn't matter.
Yeah. So what would be your top tip then for people who are listening and who know that they need to start to bring more creativity into their lives? What would be your top tip for starting?
To start.
Yeah.
But I would sort of look at what sort of creative things you either already enjoy doing and you have joy from, and just starting there, and allocate a specific time that you're going to try that out. And it might be not every day, it might be once a week or once a month. And then just put it in your diary and do it, action it, because you can put it in there, but you need to then do it.
Brilliant.
But it is starting small little steps. Often that first step, as we know, is the hardest step. But once you've done it, the feeling that you get at the end of it, you'll go, I'm going to do that again. And then make sure you then put it into your diary again.
And that's the thing, isn't it? It's actually allocating time, because it is so important to us. So where can people find out more about what you do as a creative thinking coach? And I will put the links in as well, everybody, but tell us where they can find you.
So I'm on Instagram at HKA_create, or I have a Facebook group, which is the Entrepreneurs Problem Solvers Network. And then I'm in the process of creating a new website, and so when that's available, that will be hkacreate.co.uk.
Right, and it's all about creative thinking and how it enhances pretty much every aspect of our life, actually, doesn't it? Thank you so much for coming along, because creativity is something I'm really, really passionate about, and it's really good to know why, as well as the fact that I love it. It's really been interesting to figure out why, but also, like I suppose with your OT time, start small, start with a simple thing, even if it's to go out and buy some pencils or get some paper. Might be where you start, mightn't it? So anything you'd like to add for the listeners?
No, I just I want every day to be a creative day, because the change that creativity has made to the world is so amazing, but we can create so much more, and we can be a part of that. And so I encourage everybody to bring creativity into your lives.
So it's not just about physical activity in the sense of exercise, it's also about mental activity in the field of creativity. Hannah, thank you so much. It's been really, really good to talk to you. You've been listening to me, Sarah Blytho, and my guest, Hannah Ashton, on Creating Active Lives. Don't forget to subscribe so you can hear even more wonderful episodes with my guests. Thank you. Thank you for listening to Creating Active Lives with me, Sarah Blytho, and my guests. Join me each week for more on how to create and sustain everyday activity, and follow me online at Fitness Career Mentor or Fabulous if you're interested in career development and more on creating active lifestyles.